Aria Bennett was abandoned at the altar in front of New York's elite, humiliated and heartbroken. Just when she thought her world had ended, Lucas Whitmore, her ex-fiancé's cold, enigmatic brother, stepped forward with an offer that would change everything. Was it pity, strategy, or something far deeper? As secrets unravel and love fights to survive betrayal, Aria must decide if she can trust her heart again. Where are you watching from today? Share with us in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable love stories. The grand ballroom of the Astoria Hotel gleamed like something out of a dream, its chandeliers throwing golden light across cascades of white roses and crystal glassware. Every surface shimmered, every breath smelled of expensive perfume and expectation. 300 of New York's elite filled the velvet chairs, their whispered conversations and sharp glances weaving a thick net of judgment. Somewhere among them, a few reporters poised their pens like daggers, waiting for any moment of imperfection to seize. This was supposed to be the wedding of the year, the crowning union of the Bennett girl from Queens and Chase Whitmore, heir to one of Manhattan's most powerful dynasties. At the edge of the aisle, Aria Bennett clutched her bouquet tighter, her fingers trembling slightly against the soft petals. Her dress was an elegant but simple design, a deliberate choice she'd fought for when Chase suggested something flashier. Her dark curls were pinned into a soft bun, a single sapphire clip sparkling beneath the chandeliers. She was 27, an artist who'd spent years sketching dreams onto scraps of paper in a cramped Queens apartment above her father's tailor shop. And somehow today, she was moments away from marrying a man whose last name could open doors she hadn't even known existed. The music swelled, Pachelbel's canon, tender and haunting. Aria forced her feet to move, her satin slippers gliding over the plush red runner. She caught sight of her best friend, Mia Caldwell, sitting near the front. Mia, in a bold red dress and an even bolder grin, gave her a small thumbs up. Aria smiled, heart steadying for a breath. Mia had been the one constant through the whirlwind, the one who'd warned her of Chase's wild reputation but had ultimately trusted Aria's instincts. It was enough. Aria lifted her chin, ready to claim her fairy tale. Only Chase wasn't at the altar. Instead, the officiant stood alone, a flicker of confusion tightening his features. A murmur rippled through the crowd like a cold breeze. Aria's steps faltered, her stomach twisted. Her heart, so full moments ago, slammed against her ribs. Where was he? Panic scratched at the edges of her mind. Memories flashed, mornings waiting alone for texts that came late, Chase's distracted smiles, the way he laughed off questions about late nights and missed plans. She had ignored them, believing in the man who spun promises under city lights. Mia was already moving, weaving through the guests with an urgency that made Aria's blood run cold. She pressed a crumpled note into Aria's trembling hand, her voice low and broken. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The note was short, brutally so. "Aria, I can't do this. I'm sorry. Chase." The words blurred, then sharpened, a knife twisting in her chest. The music faltered. A hush fell over the ballroom. A single sob broke from somewhere deep inside, but Aria swallowed it down, forcing her shoulders to stay straight. Cameras flashed like gunfire, reporters scribbling, society's sharks circling. She wouldn't cry, not here, not for them. Her knees wobbled, and for a heartbeat she thought she might collapse right there in front of everyone who already doubted she belonged. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "You're stronger than they know, kid." Still, the weight was unbearable. 300 eyes stared, gleaming with morbid curiosity. She was no longer the beautiful bride. She was the abandoned girl, the one foolish enough to think she could marry into a world she didn't belong to. And then, a hand. Firm. Steady. She looked up into the cool gray eyes of Lucas Whitmore. He stood there, unyielding, a pillar of strength where her world had shattered. Lucas, Chase's older brother, the one who rarely smiled, who seemed carved from stone. They had barely exchanged words before today, and yet, in the midst of her humiliation, it was his hand anchoring her. "There will be a wedding today," Lucas said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. He turned to her, his gaze unreadable but somehow soft. "If Chase isn't man enough to stand here," he said for only her to hear, "I will." Aria's breath hitched. 1,000 thoughts screamed inside her head. This was madness, a trap, a mistake. But when she looked at him, she saw something else. A way not to break. A choice not to be the story they would spin about her. And somehow, against all logic, she found herself whispering, "Okay." The music began again, unsure but willing. Lucas offered his arm, and Arya, heart hammering against her ribs, took it. She would not be the girl left behind. Not today. The Whitmore estate loomed before Arya Bennett like a fortress against the gray sweep of the Atlantic sky. All glass and steel, its sharp lines cut into the landscape with a cold elegance that made her skin prickle. She tightened her grip on the small suitcase in her hand, feeling impossibly out of place. Just 48 hours ago, she had walked into the Astoria Hotel with a heart full of dreams. Now she was standing before the Hamptons estate of a man she barely knew. Her husband, Lucas Whitmore. Lucas stood beside her, his profile unreadable as he unlocked the massive front door. Without a word, he gestured for her to step inside. The interior was as stark and stunning as the exterior. Towering ceilings, minimalist furniture in muted tones, vast marble floors so polished they reflected the moody afternoon light. It felt less like a home and more like an art installation. Beautiful, but empty. "This is yours," Lucas said, his voice low, leading her toward a wing of the house. He paused at a set of double doors and pushed them open to reveal a guest suite larger than her entire Brooklyn apartment. A king-sized bed, white linens, a private balcony that overlooked the churning ocean beyond. She turned slowly, overwhelmed by the scale, the silence. "I meant what I said," Lucas continued, his tone clipped but not unkind. "No expectations, no obligations. You're free to live here however you wish." Arya swallowed the knot in her throat. "Thank you," she managed, her voice smaller than she liked. She didn't know how to be here, didn't know how to exist in a space that felt so far from her world of sketchpads and second-hand sweaters. Lucas gave a small nod and left her alone, the door clicking shut with a soft finality. She stood there for a long moment, suitcase still in hand, the sound of the ocean whispering faintly through the glass. Slowly she unpacked, laying her few belongings into the cavernous closet, feeling absurdly small against its gleaming emptiness. She set her worn sketchbook on the desk, next to a sleek, untouched laptop that practically screamed corporate power. Her life had collided with another world, and she didn't know if she'd survive the impact. The first few days passed in a strange, suspended haze. Lucas kept his word. He was almost a ghost. He left early in the mornings, returning late at night, always composed, always distant. Their exchanges were brief, polite, a nod over coffee, a murmured good night. He was an enigma wrapped in a tailored suit, and Arya, still raw from Chase's betrayal, didn't dare peel back any layers. But sometimes the walls cracked. Once, she found a tin of chamomile tea tucked behind the rows of gourmet blends she knew Lucas preferred. Another time, a courier delivered a package addressed to her, a leather-bound journal with thick, creamy pages, perfect for sketching. No note, no explanation. Just quiet, wordless gestures that didn't fit the cold CEO he projected. Still, Arya kept her guard up. Mia's texts buzzed daily on her phone. "Be careful, Arya. The Whitmores don't do anything without a reason." Doubt gnawed at her heart, even as the loneliness of the estate pressed against her ribs like a vice. One evening, restless and needing air, she wandered the hallways and paused outside the study door, slightly ajar. Voices floated out, sharp, angry. "You've gone too far, Lucas," Veronica Whitmore's voice snapped, icy and precise. "Marrying that girl? You think this little act of chivalry will save our reputation?" Arya froze, her heart hammering. She shouldn't listen. She should walk away. But her feet were rooted to the polished marble. "I did what had to be done," Lucas replied, his tone like steel drawn across stone. "Ryan humiliated her, humiliated all of us. I won't let the family name drown because of his cowardice." Veronica scoffed, the sound brittle and cruel. "You could have let her leave. You didn't have to tether us to a nobody from Queens. She's a liability." A cold sweat broke across Arya's skin. Her nails dug into her palms. "You see a liability," Lucas said, voice low but fierce. "I see someone who didn't deserve what happened to her." Arya stumbled back into the shadows, her breath catching, her worst fears confirmed. She wasn't a partner. She was a shield, a cover story. Tears blurred her vision as she fled back to her suite, slamming the door behind her, muffling the roar of her heartbreak. In the sterile, silent room, Arya pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the balcony door, staring out at the endless, churning ocean. She had thought Lucas was different. That maybe, just maybe, he had seen her. But she was just another pawn in a game she didn't understand. And this time, she wasn't sure she had the strength left to survive it. Days bled into weeks at the Whitmore estate. But for Arya Bennett, time felt both frozen and slipping through her fingers. The polished marble floors, the towering windows, the sterile perfection of it all. None of it softened. None of it became home. She moved like a ghost through the estate, careful not to leave fingerprints on the glass, her footsteps silent on the endless marble. The loneliness clung to her skin heavier than any gown she'd worn to the wedding that shouldn't have been. But Arya had survived too much to let herself wither in gilded isolation. One evening, after staring too long at the empty ocean stretching beyond her balcony, she pulled out her laptop and began searching. Not for answers about Lucas or the Whitmores, but for herself. A community center in Bed-Stuy caught her eye, a place that hosted free programs for underprivileged children. Their art classes had shut down months ago, funding dried up, teachers gone. A spark, faint but stubborn, flickered in her chest. The next morning, armed with nothing but a second-hand duffel bag stuffed with paint, brushes, and sketchbooks, she ordered with the last of her personal savings. Arya drove 2 hours into Brooklyn. The community center was a battered old building with graffiti-smeared walls and a squeaky front door, but inside the air was warm with possibility. The kids, skeptical at first, gathered around her. Hands clumsy but eager gripped brushes as Arya knelt among them, teaching how to blend sky blues into endless fields, how to turn mistakes into masterpieces. For the first time in weeks, laughter replaced the hollow echoes in her chest. She didn't tell Lucas, she didn't tell anyone. It was hers, this little rebellion against the narrative of the abandoned, humiliated bride. It was proof that her life could still be hers to shape. But Lucas noticed. One Saturday afternoon, as Arya wiped paint from her fingers after class, a delivery van pulled up. The driver carried inside 3 massive boxes filled with sketch pads, paints, canvases, and easels, enough supplies to last the program a year. Arya stared, bewildered, until Miss Rosa, the center manager, handed her the receipt. The donor was anonymous. But she knew. Somehow, she knew. Back at the estate that evening, Arya found a fresh tin of chamomile tea in the pantry beside the expensive Whitmore blends. No note, no confrontation, just quiet, unspoken support. It confused her, angered her, softened her all at once. The walls between them didn't crumble overnight, but cracks appeared. One night, when she wandered restlessly through the house again, she found herself drawn to the library. Shelves stretched to the ceiling, laden with rare, ancient books. A single lamp cast a pool of golden light over a worn leather armchair. And in that chair sat Lucas, a thick novel open in his lap, his face relaxed in a way she had never seen before. He looked up, surprised but not unkind. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, voice softer than his usual guarded tone. Arya hesitated, then shook her head. She hovered at the threshold, unsure, until he gestured to the chair opposite him. Wordlessly, she sank into it, her heart beating in uneven rhythm. For a long moment, they sat in silence, broken only by the distant murmur of the ocean. Then Lucas spoke, low and rough. "My father built this place to be impressive, not to be lived in." The bitterness in his voice startled her. It was the first crack in his armor she'd witnessed. "I don't belong here either," she found herself admitting, her voice no louder than a whisper. Lucas looked at her. Really looked. And in that gaze, she saw the faintest flicker of understanding. "You belong wherever you choose to stand," he said quietly. The words wrapped around her like a fragile promise. The next morning, Arya found a corner of the garden overgrown and forgotten. She spent hours clearing it, her hands scratched and dirt under her nails, breathing life back into something abandoned. Days later, new soil appeared, neatly tilled. A small shed was cleaned out, converted into a makeshift art studio, complete with sunlight streaming through wide glass doors. Lucas never mentioned it. He never asked for thanks. But when Arya picked up her sketchbook again, when she lost herself in drawing the restless waves or the defiant blooms sprouting in the fresh soil, she realized something stunning and terrifying. Maybe Lucas wasn't her enemy. Maybe, just maybe, he was lost too. Searching for something real in a world that demanded perfection. And maybe, she thought as she watched a tiny green sprout push through the dirt, there was still something worth growing here. The rain came down in sheets the afternoon. Aria Bennett's world tilted again. She had just finished cleaning up after the Saturday art class at the community center, stacking colorful, dripping paintings along the windowsills, when she heard it, the low, throaty rumble of an engine pulling up outside. She peered through the cracked glass, and her heart plunged. A sleek black sports car slid to a stop by the curb. Chase Whitmore climbed out, his blonde hair dampened by the misting rain, his tailored coat immaculate. He looked exactly the same, and yet everything about him felt different now. Sharper, crueler, like a blade she hadn't seen until it cut her. She turned away, hoping to disappear into the shadows of the worn-out center, but the door creaked open before she could move. Chase stood in the entrance, flashing that familiar, easy smile that had once made her believe in fairy tales. Now, it made her stomach churn. "Aria," he drawled, stepping closer, his eyes scanning her, the smudges of paint on her jeans, the exhaustion on her face. "Playing teacher to street kids, how noble." She straightened, squaring her shoulders. "You don't belong here," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You gave up any right to find me when you left me at the altar." Chase chuckled, a cold, hollow sound. "You moved on quick, didn't you? Right into my brother's arms. Was that the plan all along?" The accusation hit like a slap. Aria recoiled, stunned. "What are you talking about?" "You used me," he hissed, stepping closer until she could see the fury and the fear behind his smirk. "You wanted the Whitmore name. Didn't matter which brother gave it to you." Aria's throat tightened with anger and disbelief. "You abandoned me, Chase. I didn't plan any of this. I survived it." But Chase wasn't listening. His gaze was sharp, calculating. "Doesn't matter what's true. It's about what people believe. And they already love the story. Poor little Aria Bennett, schemer from Queens, clawing her way into high society." He turned to leave, tossing his final blow over his shoulder. "Enjoy it while it lasts. The vultures are already circling." The door slammed behind him, rattling the frame. Aria stood frozen, the words sinking in like poisoned thorns. Within hours, it began. Tabloid headlines blazed across every screen. "Whitmore love triangle. Jilted bride seduces billionaire brother." Articles painted Aria as a manipulative social climber, spinning photos from the wedding day into a damning narrative. Commentators speculated about her true motives. Anonymous sources whispered about years of ambition and carefully laid traps. Social media was worse. Cruel, merciless. Strangers dissected her life, her art, her love. Parents from the community center called Miss Rosa, questioning whether Aria was fit to teach their children. Some withdrew their kids from her classes, too wary of the scandal. Aria sat on the floor of her guest suite that night, her back against the cold glass of the balcony doors, her phone buzzing relentlessly with notifications she couldn't bear to read. She felt herself unraveling, piece by piece, each headline ripping another seam. She thought of Lucas, of how hard he fought to maintain Whitmore Enterprises' pristine image. She thought of the press conference where his every word was calculated, his every move a strategic chess game. Would he see her as a liability now, the way Veronica had? Would he regret ever taking her hand in that ballroom? Tears blurred her vision. She opened a drawer, pulled out a sheet of paper, and scribbled a note with shaking hands. "Lucas, I don't want to drag you down. Thank you for everything. I think it's better if I leave." But as she folded it, something inside her flared, a stubborn, battered spark. If she left now, she would be exactly what they said she was. Weak, grasping, guilty, and she wasn't. She knew her own heart. She knew the truth of what had happened. Aria stared at the note, then tore it into shreds, letting the pieces flutter to the floor. She wiped her eyes, her body trembling, but her spine straightening. She would not run. Not again. Whatever Lucas chose to believe, whether he stood by her or turned away, she would face it. On her own 2 feet. Because she wasn't the girl Chase left behind anymore. She was stronger now, and she would not let them write her story. The morning after the scandal broke, the Whitmore estate felt like it was holding its breath. The usual hum of staff had gone silent, the walls heavy with tension. Aria Bennett sat curled up at the kitchen island, her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea she barely tasted. Every muscle in her body ached from sleeplessness, her mind raw from battling the tidal wave of lies. She heard the quiet approach of footsteps and looked up to see Lucas Whitmore, impeccably dressed as always, but with a tightness to his jaw she hadn't seen before. His phone was pressed to his ear as he barked crisp orders. "Call the PR team. Full press conference at headquarters by noon. I don't care what it takes. Dixit." When he hung up and turned to her, the fire in his gray eyes wasn't anger. It was something fiercer. Protective. Determined. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer as if she might shatter. Arya shook her head. "No, Chase." Her voice cracked and she forced it steady. "He's destroying me, and now your company's being dragged down too." "The stock reports." Lucas cut her off with a sharp shake of his head. "Forget the company. I can rebuild it. I can't rebuild you." She blinked, stunned by the intensity in his words. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "You could let me go. It would be easier." Lucas moved closer, each step deliberate. He cupped her chin, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. "Because I won't lose you, Arya." "Not to him. Not to anyone." His voice dropped, fierce and low. "You're not a pawn. You're not some charity case. You're the best damn thing that ever happened to me, and it's about time the world knew it." Her breath caught, the warmth of his hand anchoring her to the moment. At noon, they stood backstage at the gleaming Whitmore Enterprises headquarters in Manhattan. Reporters buzzed like hornets beyond the heavy curtains, flashes already igniting the air. Arya's stomach twisted into knots. She hadn't wanted this, to be at the center of a media circus again. But Lucas had insisted, not to defend the company, to defend her. Lucas stepped onto the podium first, his presence commanding, his tailored black suit sharp against the sea of cameras. The crowd hushed instantly. "I'm here today," he began, voice steady and sure, "to address the rumors circulating about my wife, Arya Bennett Whitmore." A ripple moved through the audience at the use of her full married name. "My brother Chase has made several claims," Lucas continued, "all of which are false. The truth is simple. Arya never pursued this family. She never manipulated anyone. If anything, I pursued her." The reporters leaned forward, pens poised. "On the day my brother left her at the altar," Lucas said, his voice thick with emotion, "I saw the strongest, kindest, most courageous woman I'd ever met. I didn't take her hand out of obligation. I took it because even then, I knew I couldn't let her slip away." He paused, scanning the crowd, then turned, lifting a hand toward the wings of the stage, toward her. Arya's legs trembled, but she moved forward, drawn by the steady beacon of his gaze. As she stepped into the blinding lights, the room fell into an even deeper silence. Lucas dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside sat a delicate silver ring, simple but beautiful, engraved with tiny daisies, the same flowers they had planted together in the forgotten garden now bursting with life. "Arya," he said, voice low but clear, carrying to every corner of the room. "I married you once to save us both from shame. Now I ask you to marry me again, freely, fully, because I love you." Tears blurred her vision, not from fear, not from pain, from joy so overwhelming it stole her breath. With a trembling laugh, Arya nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Lucas." He slipped the daisy ring onto her finger, then stood, gathering her into his arms as flashes erupted like fireworks around them. But Arya barely noticed the cameras this time. All she saw was Lucas. All she felt was hope, fierce and shining, taking root between them. Later that summer, beneath fairy lights strung through the blooming garden they had rebuilt together, Arya and Lucas said their vows once more. No crowds, no reporters, just the people who had stood by them and the wild, stubborn love they had fought so hard to protect. It wasn't the perfect ending Arya once dreamed of. It was better. It was real. And this time she knew. She wasn't standing alone. She had found her place, her partner, her home. At last. Life doesn't always follow the script we imagine. Sometimes we're abandoned when we least expect it. Sometimes we're forced to pick up the shattered pieces of our dreams and stand tall in front of a world eager to see us fall. But true strength isn't about never being broken. It's about choosing to rebuild ourselves with fierce grace, even when it hurts the most. Arya's journey reminds us that worth isn't defined by the opinions of others, the rumors they spread, or the circumstances we endure. It's defined by the courage to know your value even when others don't see it. She could have chosen bitterness, could have let betrayal define her, but she chose resilience instead. She chose to believe in the possibility of love, even when the world told her to run. And Lucas teaches us that real love isn't born from convenience or obligation. It's born from seeing someone's heart at its most vulnerable and choosing it over and over again in the face of every storm. Their story is a reminder. You are not the names they call you. You are not the whispers behind your back. You are who you decide to become. Strong, worthy, and deeply loved. Where are you watching from today? We'd love to hear your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any more inspiring tales about love, strength, and finding your true home.